This week on the Communicators, a discussion about how small cable operators deal with decisions made by Washington regulators. Our guest is Patrick Knorr, cable operator and chairman of the board for the American Cable Association.
In the world of business, there are large and small businesses. Same difference when it comes to the world of cable operators. There are large and small operators. An association that represents smaller operators is the American Cable Association. We're joined by their chairman of the board, Patrick Knorr, who joins us on the Communicators to talk about issues in relation to them. Welcome.
Thank you, Pedro. I'm glad to be here.
As we talk today, you are having a summit in town, and as even if we talk at this moment earlier today, you had a special visitor. Who was that?
We actually had the chairman of the FCC, Kevin Martin, and we actually were happy to see him.
And that denotes that maybe you weren't going to be happy to see him?
Well, no, I think it denotes that I think for many in the cable industry, even small operators, I think there's definitely been friction with the FCC at times, and I think in this case, I think it was a positive message.
Tell us exactly why he came to visit you.
And I don't think this is his only reason for visiting, but one of the things that he shared with us in his visit was he committed to relieving very small operators, those with limited capacity on their network, of the obligation to carry HD and digital signals as part of the DTV transition. And this isn't going to affect many cable systems as you look at the whole industry across the board, but for small cable operators this was a large issue, even bigger than it was for the direct broadcast satellite providers that also got relief from having that obligation imposed across the board. Because many of our members are mom and pop cable providers that might only serve a few hundred to a few thousand customers. And for them, making the investment in digital television of 5 figures, perhaps 6 figures, $100,000 or more, was something they just couldn't sustain. It would have been impossible for them to continue to do business with that type of expenditure with such a small customer base. And so this really was very meaningful to really hundreds of small cable operators across the country.
On the technical side, why is it important?
Well, the technical side, there's 2 issues for small cable operators. One is a capacity issue, where many of these are older cable systems. Because there's a small customer base, it's just not possible to invest in the cutting-edge technology that it is for larger cable operators, and that's a very real challenge. And that limited capacity makes it difficult to carry high-definition signals and add additional signals to the offering that they're giving their customers today. And so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is really a cost issue, like I was describing. To make a $100,000 investment when you have just a couple hundred customers, that's a lot of money per customer. I mean, that's hundreds of dollars per customer, which you really can't pass that along. And so really some of those small cable operators were faced with possibly having to go out of business or stop serving some small communities, which really has a big, broader impact, because I'd say one of the most important telecommunication providers that are providing broadband in many small communities are cable operators. And if they can't be in the video business, in their core business, a lot of times they won't be in a position to offer the broadband service either. So I think it was a very important public policy decision that the FCC recognized in providing some flexibility to these small cable operators.
So in your case, you run a cable operation. What kind of money were we talking as far as what you were getting ready to invest if you didn't get this relief from the FCC?
Well, and even within small cable operators, there's different types of operators. In our case, we are cutting edge, and many independent cable operators are. We serve, instead of a few hundred or a few thousand subscribers, we're serving 30, 40,000 subscribers. We're based in Lawrence, Kansas, and we're with that customer base and being focused in a geographical area, we've been able to make the investments as a private company to be cutting edge, to provide our customers with HD, and we've been providing HD broadcast signals for several years. And we're happy to do that, and we'll be making further investments, probably a couple $100,000, to make sure that the digital transition that we're providing our customers with an analog signal, a digital standard def, and a digital high definition signal. I mean, if you can afford to do it, and that's, I think, one of the ironies in this, no matter whether you're a small or large cable operator, you want to do as much as you can for your customer. And so do small independent cable operators. And that's what we want to do. And again, we're in a position where we serve a little bit larger customer base, a little bit more concentrated. We can afford to make that investment, and we want to make that investment, not just because the FCC wants us to, but because we want to serve our customers and be competitive. So really this relief is for much smaller cable operators than even we are. You know, again, several hundred to several thousand subscribers, and that's really where this is going to be targeted. And those, they'd love to offer HD as well. It's just not economically feasible.
So this wasn't initially, though, as far as the ACA is concerned, what you were asking for from the FCC as far as a waiver, as far as HD and the conversion to HD is concerned.
No, it really was. I mean, I think there was some confusion injected into the conversation, and I think it caused some friction in resolving this. You know, as we discussed, you know, I think the industry has put this in the context of dual carriage, which from a provider standpoint and an operator standpoint, that's what it feels like. And that's and I think because the timing of that characterization, I think the FCC really felt, and I think understandably so, that dual carriage was being placed specifically on the recent order for viewability. And really the dual carriage of frustration for the industry was really the totality of the different rules relating to the digital transition. The requirement to carry HD, you know, the requirement to provide a signal to all customers, and you know, I think other ways that the DTV order was being implemented really increasingly felt like a burden and an increasing burden that would require a cable operator to carry multiple signals. I do think that the 2007 order, the viewability order in and of itself, isn't what drove that. I do think it was, which is where we were able to come, you know, come to an understanding with the FCC, is that probably the root cause and the additional obligation really went back further in time to 2001 and a requirement to carry the HD signal in it, or any digital signal in its native format, which for small cable operators required a huge investment. And so I think what we've been able to do is really get to the root cause and the core problem, which was really the additional obligation, which is what the FCC is relieving.
When you take on these issues, I think it was the president of your organization, Matt Polka, who said that in many cases larger cable companies kind of call the tune as far as issues that the FCC deal with, and then by extension, smaller cable companies have to deal with a whole different set of circumstances. So if a rule or something comes down for a larger cable company, it affects you entirely. This was one. What are some other issues as far as the way that the smaller cable companies and larger cable companies have to deal with issues, and how it affects smaller cable companies more than larger ones?
Well, I think there's a couple issues. I mean, one is captured in what we filed with the FCC on tying and bundling, which is really what we feel is probably the biggest issue, because you know, the DTV transition really affected smaller cable operators. What's affecting all cable operators, especially independent cable operators, our membership, all of our membership, is programming issues related to the purchasing of programming. And there's two facets of this. One is retransmission consent, which is you know, an issue that is really going to become a major issue towards the end of this year. There's a 3-year cycle where broadcasters basically negotiate terms of carriage with cable operators. That 3-year cycle is coming up at the end of this year, and there's really a clear intent on broadcasters to charge as much as possible, in particular to small cable operators, because they don't have market power. If I'm a small cable operator, again, with a few thousand subscribers in a broadcast market area that may serve 500,000, then the market exchange, you know, I represent a fraction of a percent of the viewers for the broadcaster. but let's say that broadcaster is CBS. We just had the Final Four. If the CBS affiliate says, I'm not going to give you the signal, I lose 100% of the Final Four as a small cable operator. The broadcaster at stake has a fraction of a percent of the viewer base, and that viewer base has another alternative, whereas my customers do not have another alternative for the Final Four. So it's really, it's not a market-based negotiation. It's very one-sided, not an exchange of value, because the broadcaster really doesn't have much at stake, much to lose, but the operator has everything to lose. So, it ends up, with a much higher rate being extracted from smaller operators than from large providers, like a Comcast or a Time Warner, or especially our direct competitors, DirecTV, EchoStar. I mean, it's true they are paying broadcasters, but they are paying a fraction of what broadcasters are now asking from independent cable operators.
Why should the FCC get involved in this?
Well, I mean, I think it has several impacts. I mean, one is exactly what broadcasters talk about, and that's localism. I mean, broadcasters talk about they should be able to charge because of the importance of local broadcast signals, local news to the market. While at the same time, what's actually happened in the marketplace is really extortion, where they say you pay this or we disallow you to provide the signals, in which case, those cable customers don't get the local news. They don't get the local, that local broadcast station. So it's very disruptive to the marketplace and to those viewers. And then there's a core, really issue in the middle of this, in that these broadcasters are using public granted licenses. I mean, the FCC provide those licenses to serve the community, not so that you can extort cable customers to get as much money as possible. And that's how they're using those licenses that really the public owns.
In paperwork to the FCC on this issue, this is what the NAB had to say on the issue. In part, they said, broadcasters do not have undue or unfair leverage in retransmission negotiations. It is counterintuitive to suggest that a local broadcast station has market power over any MVPD when such a large portion of the broadcaster audience uses the MVPD to receive broadcast programming, along with dozens or even hundreds of other video programming channels.
And I think there's some truth to that statement when the negotiation is between a large broadcaster and satellite, or a large broadcaster and a large cable operator, like a Comcast or Time Warner. And I think in that case, there is a market exchange. The broadcaster has a lot to lose when they potentially lose 30 to 40% of their viewers if carriage is discontinued. But that is not the negotiation that takes place with the small operators. Again, we're talking about maybe having a fraction of a percent of the total viewership in the market. It's a rounding error for the broadcaster. They don't care. They're not going to lose any viewers. They have nothing to lose, and that is where the marketplace is broken.
So what can the FCC do on this, in your opinion? What power do they have?
I think there's several things that they can do. I think one element is extending to us the same benefit that satellite has. Satellite has the option of placing broadcasters on a tier. I think that would balance the negotiations somewhat. Then if a broadcaster was extracting an unreasonable amount of money, a cable operator would have the option of placing that on a standalone tier, and the customer would decide whether that was a fair market value or not. And that does inject more of a market-based solution into that dynamic. Something that the chairman has specifically suggested is that if they exceed a certain price, then they would be placed on a separate tier. And the chairman specifically has discussed that as possibly a viable option to solve both the retransmission consent question and also broader programming abuses as it relates to price and small operators.
Another topic altogether.
Sure.
Smaller cable operators. They're currently facing competition from telcos or telecommunications companies that are offering, video services and other services. How do you stay competitive in that kind of market, especially for the smaller ones?
Well, I think it varies. I mean, for the very small cable providers that we talked about that would, get exemptions, for the DTV transition, they're not facing as much competition because no one wants to serve these markets. I mean, and that's part of the value, and the reason that they should get special consideration is because, Comcast doesn't want to buy them. They're in very small communities. The telcos don't want to go in there and provide service. They're expensive to serve, and so the fact that they're in there providing service, providing competitive service to satellite, and again, in most cases, the only broadband provider in those markets, I think they're providing a very valuable service to the community. and the fact that they're one of the few people serving those communities is the competitive advantage. In larger markets, we're in the same situation as everybody's in, and this is where our company's at. I mean, we compete with AT&T, we compete with DBS, DirecTV, EchoStar, and we need to compete like everybody else. We need to be better. We need to be good. We need to provide great customer service. We need to provide great technology. We need to provide HD, VOD, fast internet service. And again, we compete like everybody else. And in those areas, we're not looking for special consideration. We just want to make sure we can be competitive and the rules are as fair as they can be, and we can compete on that level playing field, and then we feel very good about that. We feel that we can provide a better service, better customer service to our customers, and win that fight.
Isn't there a legislative effort that would give cable or telcos the ability to go to directly to a state as a whole instead of locality by locality in order to set up business, and doesn't that affect the smaller cable operator?
Well, I think that's in place in many states already. It's already in place in Kansas. And I don't think that's catastrophic at all. I mean, because again, what's going to determine, they're going to go into large markets first. I mean, there just isn't a whole lot of profit to be made in these small communities. I mean, that's, a great niche that our member companies are serving. And so they're not clamoring to go into these markets. So even if they have a state franchise, this isn't where they're deploying their services.
Is there a trend where smaller cable operations, sensing the competition and sensing their ability not to compete, sell out to the larger ones? And if that's the case, what happens as a whole as far as service is concerned, or what happens to the consumer?
I really don't think that's something that is happening for many of our small customers. I think in our small operators, I think for some operators, I think absolutely you're going to see systems be acquired and sold. But for really rural markets, there's just not a whole lot of demand to serve those customers. So competition, really isn't a lot of pressure, and there isn't anybody clamoring to acquire these small providers. The disparity between some of these rural areas with limited technological capacity and what an urban cable system will sell for with the technology deployed is almost a factor of 10. In some cases, just to get them off the books, you have some operators will give away rural cable systems to someone who's willing to operate them and make a go of it. So I think there really is an important niche, and again, especially that broadband service that these small operators are providing, and that niche I think will sustain them for many years to come because other people aren't coming into the market.
As far as price is concerned, what do smaller operators charge the consumer for service compared to larger ones? Is there a big difference on what a consumer with a smaller cable operation will pay for monthly service as opposed to a larger one?
I think it really varies because compared to larger cable operators, there's such a wide variation in the type of services being offered. Because that's one point in the case of many of these small rural cable systems, they're not offering 200 channels. They're not offering 100 channels. And they recognize that, and they don't offer at the same price point. So, I mean, they're offering 30, 40 channels, maybe 50 channels, but they're offering it for $30, $40 instead of, $50. And then for larger cable operators, including us, where we are offering over 100 channels and we're offering a very aggressive service offering, we are close to that $50 range, which I think many cable operators are at for their kind of core basic product.
How much is your service now more video services or other compared to other services like video on demand and broadband services and things like that?
We're a blend. I mean, again, we're fairly have been aggressive with our technology deployment, so we're deploying video on demand, we're deploying HD. We've had high-speed data deployed since the mid-90s. We've had phone service deployed since about 2002. So, other services represent a very large base of our business model at this point.
What do you think is the smaller cable operators' role in broadband deployment across the United States? An issue here in Capitol Hill and Washington about making sure that even the most rural areas get broadband service. What's the small cable operators' role, do you think?
Oh, I think we have an amazing role. I mean, I think, again, when it comes to small markets, there's rural telcos out there that are providing broadband in small communities. But I'd say for every rural telco, that is providing broadband in a small community. There's probably 3 or 4 cable operators, because where the large phone companies are serving small communities, they're not deploying DSL, they're not deploying advanced services, they're certainly not deploying competitive video services, just because the economic model isn't there. So it's really the hometown cable operator that's been serving that community, for 20 years, is the one that's bringing broadband to these small communities. I mean, they're doing it, and so I think that is just tremendously. I think it's key to getting broadband into rural areas are the things that small cable operators are doing. And I think it's approximately 80–90% of our systems now have broadband deployed, in markets as small as population 100, 150, 25, some very small communities.
This part of the association's efforts this week is going on Capitol Hill. Who are you talking to, and what issues are you talking about aside the ones that we've already addressed?
Well, I mean, I think our core issues, we're going to try to stay focused, and it's going to be many of the things we're discussing here. I mean, retransmission consent, the tying and bundling order that's pending at the FCC. I mean, we're still a mom-and-pop group. I mean, we have limited resources, so I mean, we're really going to be focusing with the resources we have, on commerce committees and those that can really help steer legislation and can impact our industry is where our focus is going to be as we go on the Hill tomorrow. And that's where, as an association, where our focus, really remains. But we're getting more and more broad all the time, because so many of these issues, as many of our members, again, we have 2 constituency. One are these very small members with limited capabilities technically, and then we have a lot of members like ourselves which are very advanced, and as advanced or more advanced than even the large cable operators. And that means that our breadth of issues we're facing has increased. So as an association, we're tracking net neutrality, we're tracking, CALEA, CP&I, all these issues that affect large cable operators, that affect, large phone companies, are now affecting, some of these smaller independent cable operators. And so, we've really had to change the structure of our organization to make sure that we can manage that, because now more and more we're not only an independent cable operator, we're the independent telco, and have similar problems as to what they have, and so we need to really be able to manage all these issues at the same time, which is really a large change for our organization when you're just looking at video issues, which is mainly programming and retransmission consent. Really was a core issue for us. And in many cases the only issue for us for probably the first 10 of the 15 years of the organization. And there was other things that would come up and we would tackle those. But now, we're simultaneously trying to track 12, 1 dozen, 2 dozen issues that are very sophisticated. And I think we're doing a good job of increasing the capacity of the organization and involving our larger members that are engaged on more complex issues.
Are you treated differently when you go through a legislator's door because you represent smaller cable operators?
Yes, but increasingly in a positive way. I mean, I think initially, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was, who are you and why do I need to talk to you? I'm talking to the NCTA, which is representing, the very large cable operators. But I think increasingly they understand that why, NCTA represents, 20, 30, 40 very large operators. We're representing 1,200 member companies. And most people, can't even imagine there's that many independent cable, and these are companies, not systems being served. We're representing 1,200 mom-and-pop companies, many of them mom-and-pop companies, and again, several larger companies. And I think they really understand that, when we come across the door, I mean, we're coming across with very legitimate issues. I mean, we're not unlike, the AT&T's broadcasters. I mean, most of our members are privately owned. I mean, we're not looking at this from a stock market perspective. We're looking at this from, hey, we just want to be competitive. We just want to help our customers, which is a very sincere, genuine pitch, which does resonate with legislators. And I think, increasingly they're aware of us, they're aware of our organization, and they're very interested in what we have to say.
Does Kevin Martin treat you any differently?
Yes. I mean, to a certain extent, I think, again, he appreciates the fact, and we don't have the option of being heavy-handed. I mean, that's the other thing, whether it's Martin's office or a legislator's office. I mean, we're trying to make a logical argument. We're not able to say we're giving this much money to your campaign. We're not able to say, talk about stockholders. We don't have a whole lot of weight to throw around.
How much do you spend on lobbying efforts?
I think total lobbying efforts, it's probably far less than $1 million. And when you're dealing with competitors that are doing multi-million dollars, it's a tremendous disparity. But we are increasing that because there's so many issues we need to cover.
As far as this being a presidential election year, does that affect how much legislatively that goes on as far as cable issues are concerned, especially the ones you're concerned with? And as you're looking at the election year, are there one of the three candidates that you're watching more closely than others because they represent your issues or at least are more sympathetic to your issues?
I think each one has different dynamics. I think all the candidates, whether Democrat or Republican, I think traditionally cable would have said that a Republican administration would be very easy on cable. I'm not sure anybody would says that the past few years have been that way. So I think there are no clear assumptions on what's going to be easy or best. I think we'll just have to kind of take a wait and see approach. And there's another piece of that question.
Do you wonder if there's going to be a lot legislatively done as far as cable issues because of a presidential election?
Yeah, I think it's a major challenge going into the election year, especially with the presidential election, to see major legislation passed. Now that said, I think there's two issues. With retransmission consent, with those rules looming. And if legislators get a sense that that could be very disruptive, especially going into the DTV transition, I think that may garner more attention, especially depending on how the FCC looks at it. And I think if the FCC has increasing concern about how those negotiations are proceeding, and especially in small markets, and again the disruptive nature, I think you could see some activity. And I think certainly there's potential for activity as it relates to DTV if there's concerns about, again, disruption or any holes that need to be closed, which thankfully I think the biggest hole we felt was out there. It appears the FCC is now in the process of closing that hole, which I think will be very good for consumers.
So as someone who's not a Washingtonian, you look at DTV transition and say, how's it going? How would you assess how's it going?
I say it's going to be painful. It's going to be painful for consumers. It's going to be painful for companies. To an extent, but I think especially cable customers, I think will probably be disrupted the least. I think we're going to manage that, and especially with this rulemaking, I think there'll be very minimal disruption to cable customers. I think there'll be far more concern in the marketplace than what actually transpires. I think when it comes to cable customers and even satellite customers, I think they will receive very little disruption at the end of the day. And I think with the communication that's in place, I think there is a very good plan for managing that. And so when I say it's going to be painful for consumers, I think it's just because it's going to affect them. And I don't think there's any way around that. They're going to have to, if they're off the air, going to have to make a purchase. Even if they're a cable operator, with all the discussion, and that's where, for those that aren't going to be affected, the communication almost has a downside, with people constantly asking, is this going to affect me? What do I need to do? Do I need to get a new TV? And I think, anytime you have anxiety or you ask your customers to do something or even understand something, there's a certain disruptive nature of that. Now, that said, I think in the long run, it's going to be very positive. We're going to bring more and more HD to consumers. We're going to be able to bring digital services. I think in the long run, this is going to increase the capacity to offer services to customers. And that's really not necessarily the broadcast digital transition, but just as cable operators transition to more and more digital services, I think the potential for providing a lot of consumer benefits is huge.
Aside from being the the chairman of the board for American Cable Association, Patrick Norris serves as the chief operating officer for Sunflower Broadband. Thanks for being on the Communicators.
Thank you.